Hello. What we're going to be discussing today is connecting the Yamaha MFC-10 Foot Controller to your TYROS 4. Now, to get into some basics of this controller, you can set any of these buttons, 0 through 9, to pretty much do whatever you want. You have two modes, program change mode and function mode. What does that mean? Well, program change is generally to change your program or instrument, for an example. And so with program change mode, you can basically assign any of these to switch to a certain channel, a certain bank, a certain voice, and you can program each of these buttons to do that. In function mode, you can program these buttons to do 4 things. Each one of these buttons can do 4 things, like change a voice, play a note, play 4 different notes, etc. So with that being said, you can do all kinds of programming to this. Actually quite overwhelming, especially if you try to do it all from the little interface that's on it. However, you don't need to worry about any of that with the TYROS 4. It allows you to do all the main control through the TYROS, and all you have to do is just get this done with the initial setup. Once you have it set up to talk, the TYROS will know how to use it. You can do transposing, you can tell it to pick different registries, you can have it do whatever you want from the TYROS, and you can reconfigure it to do different options for different songs through the TYROS. Once this is set once, you won't have to set it again. So how does it work? Well, instead of assigning each of these buttons to different functions, like say you want one to be sustain and one to be pitch bend, or setting that to volume, or whatever, instead of assigning each one of those manually, what the TYROS does is it simply has this as controller number 7, and each one of these buttons are assigned to the value of notes. So we have in your MIDI out coming from this device, the TYROS converts it so that each button is a different note. You have 99 different functions or buttons. Well, you only see 10, but you can do 99 different functions with them. So what the TYROS has done is it will program each one of these buttons to simply be a different note. And you set this device to talk on MIDI Channel 16. There are 16 channels in MIDI, and you could think that like a CB channel, TV channel, whatever. This will transmit all its information on channel 16 if you set it to that. Then on the TYROS, you tell it to listen to channel 16. And what the TYROS does then is it says, okay, if you played C1, do this function. If you play C#1, do this function. You played D1, do this function. So each of the 99 notes assigned to these functions, these 99 functions, can be assigned to something different. Now actually I need to correct that. The TYROS it configures all 99 to 99 notes on the scale, but it actually only translates those first 30 into usable functions on the TYROS. So let's go into looking what you need to do to get this set up, and I'm not going to go into any more technical information with that. If you start reading the books, it might make more sense to you, and also once I show you the TYROS panel, it might be a little more clear. But once the TYROS configures these, you can think of each one of these as nothing more than a note. It's just like if you hit a note on a keyboard. It's going to assign each one of these to a note, and that's all it's doing. And then it knows if you hit that note on channel 16 to do a certain function. So, what do we have to set up on the back? So, starting from this side here, we have the normal or mix mode. We want to keep it in normal. We have MIDI or WX mode. We want to keep it in MIDI. Right here we have our MIDI in and our MIDI out. For the first configuration of this, we need the TYROS to program it and tell it to use each of those buttons as separate notes. So we are going to initially use MIDI in to send data from the TYROS to the foot controller. After it's configured, then we will plug the MIDI out into the TYROS. You only need one cable because you don't need them do both at the same time. So we would plug into the MIDI out on the TYROS, and then it will send the notes that you play to the TYROS. Here you can see where you can plug in additional foot controllers like sustain pedals, for example. And this is referred to as controller 1, controller 2, controller 3, controller 4. And those are MIDI events, basically. And then, like I say, the main foot switch, the main controller is controller 7, which in MIDI is for volume. So they kept it to that because this could be used for volume. Now the nice part is you can tell the TYROS to take anything from channel 16 that's for controller 7 and be anything you want. You can have it be expression instead of volume, which is handy. Because if you don't want everything to just be turned up across the board, but you want them to keep the volume set that you want on the EQ and just have more expression, increasing the volume that way, you can do that. So, but that's getting into other things. So back to what I was saying, we're going to take this now and we're going to plug it into the TYROS. So give me a moment to get situated and I'll show you that next step. To do the initial configuration of the foot controller, we are going to take your MIDI cable that has the 5-pin DIN connector, like so, and we are going to plug that in to the MIDI in for the initial configuration because we want to send the data into the foot controller. Okay, so let's get that all turned on. Alright, so now what do you do next? Alright, so the first thing we need to do is click Function. That'll take us to the Functions menu. Then we are going to click MIDI. Once we click MIDI, we are going to keep it in all parts. Right there, I'll bring that in so you can see a little better. We're going to do all parts, and we are going to click Edit. So now we're in the Edit section for all parts. We want to go to the very farthest right tab for the MFC controller. Edit. We want to use MIDI B, the MIDI B inputs, which it's already set. You can use these buttons to change it if you want to use the other inputs, but we're going to use MIDI B. And it's already set to channel 16, but you could change that by hitting this button here. But we're going to use channel 16, which reminds me, I missed a step. So back down here on the foot controller, we need to tell it to use channel 16. We've got it plugged into the MIDI in on the back of the controller. So let's go ahead and we're going to press the two edit buttons, memory and FC edit, and we're going to hold them both down and it changes to the channel selection. Right now it's set to C1. So we're going to hit yes or increment up to 16. So now we're telling it to also talk on channel 16. Now we're going to write the information. It's flashing asking for a confirmation. We're going to go ahead and hit the yes increment button again because this time it means yes. Now the device is set to channel 16. So what do we do next? We need to throw it into function mode. Hit the F to throw it in function mode. So as long as it says F up there, you're good to go. Now back onto the TYROS. Let the screen get synchronized here. Okay, so now back on the TYROS, we want to send the MFC setup information. So you hit this, and it's just warning you that you need to do what I just showed you. It says it's a normal. Make sure the switch is thrown into normal mode, and make sure the lamp function is set, and make sure the function lamp is on, which that's the F. So we hit OK, and it sends the programming data to the foot controller. What that is doing is assigning, as I mentioned earlier, each one of those buttons is now assigned to a key. So what does that mean when it assigns each button to a key? Well, as you can see, it shows right here. C#1 is button 0. D1 is button 1. D#1 is button 2, etc. And it goes on down the list. And we can scroll down and you can see what I mean. And it only controls the first 30. So if your display said F30, which I'll show you in a second how to change those. But basically, that's what's done, is it's assigned each of those buttons to a note. Now when you play that note on channel 16, because you've told it to listen for an MFC on channel 16, now what do you want it to do? So in this case, it's going to do start and stop. If you hit these options here, you can see you have all kinds of settings you can set it to. You can, we'll start at the top, you can do sustain, you can do, so some of the other ones here, modulation, and you can do modulation for each instrument, right 1, right 2, right 3, or the left. You can also do, let's go here a little far, you can do the articulation 1 for each instrument. You can do articulation 2 for each instrument. You can do turn off the digital effects processor for each instrument, for right 1, 2, and 3, and left. Basically, you have control over everything. A quick overview, just so you know. The times 10 button basically lets you change the 10's place. So in other words, if I hit times 10, it lets me change that number. So now I'm in function 89. If I hit times 10 again and I want to change it to function 0, it's in function 0, 0. Same with program mode. I'm going to use the function button to go into program mode, and we have 128 programs that you can set to. So you can get, if you hit it 3 times or 2 times, that third digit can be either a 0 or a 1, 2, 3, and so that gives you the option for 0 or 1, and then the next digit you can change to whatever you want. But they only go up to 128 because MIDI is 7-bit and only supports 128 values. So if you did 99, that's fine, but if we did 199, it will automatically throw it down to 128 because that's as high as you can go. With that being said, we are going to primarily, with the TYROS, only use function mode. So in function mode, you can control each of these and set these to a different note, as I mentioned earlier. So that is what the TYROS has done. It has converted each of those functions, each of those buttons, into notes.